Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another video. Today we're going to be taking a look back at my ABC book, a project that I created as a sort of a practice project years ago. I'm going to talk more about the sort of origin story of this project as I go along, but for now let's start with A and B and see what I came up with. A is for apple. How many apples are there? Talk about unoriginal. Apple? A is for apple? That was the best I could come up with? Perhaps I should have pushed myself a little harder in the realm of originality, but you can see me sort of practicing my watercolor technique, and that's really what this whole project was about, was to give myself a book to illustrate that I didn't necessarily have to sweat too much about the writing. You know, ABC, your structure is already built in from the beginning, and you don't have to worry too much about the writing. And clearly I didn't. Look at this. B is for box. These boxes are filled with books. Maybe I should have worried a little more about the writing. But there you go. That's the rather inauspicious beginning of the project. Let's go ahead now and move on to C and D. So C is for cup. Would you like a cup of coffee? I do have a memory a few years later after I created this of showing this project to a guy at an actual children's book publisher, and he was like, "Coffee? Really? In a kid's book? You're gonna you're gonna choose to illustrate coffee?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Maybe I should have. Cocoa might have been better. Who knows?" But interestingly, I guess I decided to include like a cat without referring to the cat in the text. Always include at least one thing that is in the illustration that starts with the letter C. Maybe challenge the kids or whoever's reading this to notice, why did I include that object or animal? D is for doll. Each doll is dressed differently. Well, at least we got 3 different D words in this one. The caliber of the writing is gradually improving. I had fun with this. I guess you can see it's like a, let's zoom in a little. This doll is wearing a kimono. That doesn't start with the letter D, but anyway, I had fun doing that illustration. Let's move on to the next 2 letters. So here we are with E and F. E is for egg. Who's going to eat these 11 eggs? I suppose I was getting a little more clever with sneaking in the number 11 here. And of course we have the suggestion of a big elephant in the background. Do elephants eat eggs? I suppose they would, given the chance. I noticed that I decided to have each beginning letter have at least some sort of illustrated aspect to it, putting the E on an egg. Let's move over here to the letter F. F is for flower. These flowers are fresh and fragrant. Interestingly, this one is really just taking flowers and forcing them into the shape of an F. It seems to go a little bit against some of the philosophy that I use elsewhere in the book. But I did say I was going to talk a little bit about the origin of this. I was an English teacher in Taiwan for like the 2nd time. Those of you who have been watching my videos over the years, you know that I used to teach English in Taiwan. And the 2nd time was when I challenged myself to create this book. And I was teaching to little kids. I was teaching English to little kids, so I suppose I used this in those classes. But I had an eye on really the practice, and maybe I might have deluded myself into thinking this was publishable. I doubt that it is, really. It's not quite high caliber enough work, but it was very good practice. G is for grapes. These grapes are good for making jelly. Of course, the jelly stands out as starting with the letter J. Maybe should have thought that one through a little more. And then the random grasshopper just hanging around. This one, the letter H, is I think what I started to try to do the further I went along, was to actually make an object in the shape of the letter. So H is for house, home sweet home. And I think in a way it becomes more fun when you start making the object take the shape of the letter, rather than just putting a whole bunch of houses, say, to spell out, or to form the letter H. And again, the horse just popped in there to add another H word in there. And yeah, I do highly recommend, if you are an aspiring illustrator and looking for a project to do, but you can't think of what you want to do, why not? Yeah, assign yourself. Give yourself the job of creating an ABC book. I is for island. Hey, an igloo on a tropical island? That's impossible. I like this one. Again, this has that idea of taking the thing that's being illustrated and creating the illustration. Now, interestingly, a while ago I did this Chinese character challenge, which was basically the same idea, except I took the kanji, or the Chinese character for island, and I made it, did quite a similar sort of an illustration to this. One thing that you can see going on here is what I believe is called wet on wet watercolor. I'm going to zoom in here to show you. What you do is you take your brush and put clear, ordinary water into the area where you want to achieve this effect. So it has no color at all. It's just you dampen this area right in here. And then you go on top of that immediately with the blue paint, the blue watercolor, and that's how you get that effect of this sort of blurring edge. I'll zoom in. I know at some point it's going to stop being in focus, but yeah, there you go. Let's pull back just a little bit, and there you can see that effect that you get. Give that a try if you like working in watercolor. See if you can dampen the page first and then drop the paint on top of that and get that sort of blurred effect. A lot of people, especially people who are masters of watercolor, they can do incredible stuff with that technique. J is for jigsaw puzzle. I'll have this one done in a jiffy. And I guess this is juice snuck in there. But I sort of liked the idea of taking the pieces and having them form the shape of a J, even pieced together. You sort of figure you could actually do this if you had such a puzzle. And with each subsequent illustration, that was kind of my goal, as I said, to form the actual letter from the object that's being described. Let's move on to the next two letters. Now, having said that, I immediately kind of gave up in these next two letters, basically taking a bunch of keys and forcing them into the shape, or letters and forcing them into the shape of the letter L. What can I say? Sometimes I was able to come up with a good idea, and other times I wasn't. K is for key. Which one of these is the key to the kitchen? Do you have a key to the kitchen? Normally you're able to just walk into the kitchen, Crelly. Little Kiwis there. Our friends in New Zealand might be pleased to see that. And here we are with the letter L. Remember the days of writing letters? When I did this, it was circa 1993, 94. People still did send letters back then. And I still do, periodically. And here's our little lizard friend stopping by just to signify the letter L. Maybe not the best in terms of clever illustrations here. Let's move on to the next two and see if I did any better. M is for maze. This maze is most mystifying. Working real hard to get those M words in there. I liked this one. I probably could have done a better job with the illustration, but I like the concept of creating an actual maze. Doesn't seem so hard to figure out how to get through this maze if you just follow along the edge of it. Maybe not the biggest challenge there for maze lovers. This one I noticed that I didn't even bother, I got a monkey in on this illustration, but this one it's really just the nests. I was slacking off that day. I wonder how long it took me to do this project. I probably challenged myself to do one illustration per day or something like that. So. N is for nest. 9 nests for 19 eggs. So I suppose that counts as a little bit clever, tiny bit clever. These illustrations are a combination of watercolor, pen and ink for the outlines, and then colored pencil. I think I see at least a little in there. If not, it is entirely watercolor. O is for onion. Are these onions okay? Obviously. Now, this was in the days before the internet, and I do wonder if I actually looked at photos or at real onions before doing this illustration. This may be an example of, illustrating onions entirely from memory If so, I'll pat myself on the back. It's not bad in terms of the details that I was able to recall. We live in a golden age now of finding reference on the internet for almost anything, and not to be like the old man, you guys don't know how good you have it. But in the old days, it really was sometimes challenging to find the reference you needed before we had Google image search or stuff like that. P is for pencil. Can you draw a picture on a piece of paper? And then, of course, I snuck in a little drawing of a penguin. Interestingly, it doesn't look as if I did the pencil penguin using a pencil. It looks as if I did this with watercolor or ink or something. I don't know. It doesn't have that sort of pencil-y look. So strange choice there that I can't fully justify. These ones, again, really just taking the objects and forcing them into the shape of the letter. Seems like I sort of went back and forth between the two different approaches. Q is for quilt. This quilt is quite quaint, isn't it? I was really stretching it with that one. But it is sort of fun to see how I went in and did the different patterns, trying to make it look as with a real quilt, as if you had certain repeating pieces of cloth that were being stitched together. I don't know if there is a discernible pattern there, if I was just sort of throwing it together. That one at least does have the letter Q sewn into a quilt. That might qualify as the object being illustrated, I'm not sure. Here we are with the robots. Let's see, what did I say here? R is for robot. These robots rarely get rusty. I like this guy leaning over here. It wouldn't be a letter R without me. And the random rabbit tossed in there as well. Random, see, I could have put that in there somewhere. In any case, yeah, this is another one where I just sort of forced the illustrated objects into the shape of the letter R. Probably could have done a better job with that one. Let's move on to the next two letters. S is for strawberry. Some strawberries are sweet, some are sour. Now this one, of course, is just throwing a bunch of strawberries into the shape of letter S, but I think I managed to do some pretty good illustration work here. I think, that's the goal of a project like this, is you are forced to illustrate a wide variety of things. And again, I don't know if I had actual strawberries that I was looking at. Maybe I was able to find photos. Who knows? But I did manage to get some fairly convincing looking strawberry illustration going here. This has the white gouache, my beloved white gouache. Even back then in 1993, I was making full use of the beloved white gouache. Spider? I don't know. I think I might have been able to do a better job with this spider. That just looks like a little goofball with 8 legs. Who knows if I should revisit this project and correct some of these errors. Here we are with letter T. T is for train. This toy train can take a trip down the tracks. Now I like how this one is sort of like a sliced image of a train track, cut vertically so as to create the letter T. I think that was at least a little bit clever. And again, instead of just taking a bunch of trains and forcing them into a T, I used the track. I thought that worked out fairly nicely. And our little tiger, I don't know which is worse between the illustration of the spider and the illustration of the tiger. Is that what a tiger looks like? Probably not. U is for umbrella. If it's raining, you'd better get under one. That was my strenuous effort to get the word under into my letter U. This one, again, sort of all about the patterns. But I guess I did just resort to the putting everything into the shape. This time it's sort of interesting, though, to see the umbrellas from above, and you can sort of see the suggestion of people underneath holding the umbrellas. That at least made it slightly more interesting than just putting a bunch of umbrellas together. Here, the letter V. V is for vegetables. Vegetables are very, very valuable. And yeah, we get a little bonus illustration here of peas in a pod forming the letter V. Yeah, I don't know if I could have probably done a better job. Hey, I got some asparagus in there. That might not have been the first thing that I was thinking of back then. I suppose I needed straight lines. Anything that forms a straight line was a good candidate for this one. All right, we're very near the end. Let's see what I did next. W is for waterfall. Wait a minute, a whale in a waterfall? Weird. This one certainly would have benefited from photo reference because this is my sort of memory of what a waterfall looks like. Looks nothing like an actual waterfall. I feel like actually the writing maybe improved as I went along. This sort of a whale in a waterfall, weird. You know, I was at least trying to do something better than A is for apple, and leaving it at that. X is for xylophone. This is exactly the sort of xylophone I need. This one, I have to say, is not very good as an illustration. Looks like I maybe was growing a little tired by the time I got to this part of the book. No drop shadows, just looks a little substandard. My apologies for the letter X. Let's see if I redeem myself with Y and Z. Y is for yarn. Yellow yarn for a yellow scarf. Looks like I put a little more time into this one. I love how the brand name is simply Yarn. I'm looking for yarn brand yarn. Do you guys carry yarn brand yarn? But finally we get to the letter Z, and this one I had some fun with. Z is for zoo. This zoo has 0 zebras. And that's it, folks. I got to the end of my little ABC project. But as a bit of a bonus, I want to show you just the first 2 letters of a second alphabet book that I thought I had the energy to do. Turns out I didn't, because I never got past the first 2 letters. But let's go ahead and have a look at those. So I think this is actually from after I came back from that second trip to Taiwan. I had this idea of an alphabet book where every one of the letters is a building of some kind. And I don't know if I bothered to start writing words to go along with this, but you can see I was getting a little more ambitious in terms of the illustration having a full background and so forth. And I guess I just liked the idea, the architect in me liked the idea of trying to come up with buildings that would convey that shape of the letter while still looking like functional buildings. So there's the A one. And letter B looking a little more, what is that, like Mediterranean, sort of Spanish or Italian, red-tiled roofs. With the barber shop, that must have been the letter B. What does it say? Bonita's Barber Shop. I suppose I did sit down and try to come up with some words to go along. But sadly, at this point, I got distracted by something else. I think having done one alphabet book, I just didn't have it in me to do a second one. But anyway, I hope you guys found this inspirational, and if you are an illustrator who, like me at that time, wanted to illustrate something but just didn't know what to do in terms of the writing, an ABC book is a great way to jump in there and just know what your structure is right from the start, and you know where you're going, you know, from A all the way to Z, and then it's just a matter of doing all those illustrations. And if you can, some writing, hopefully better than the writing I did. But that kind of brings us to the end of things today. Hang on, I'm going to go ahead and grab my books so that I can say thank you to anyone who has supported me by getting them, like the drawing lesson. I'm very nearly done with the sequel to this book, the comic book lesson. Hopefully we'll be able to show some sneak peeks from that in the months ahead. And the 2-pencil method, my book on showing you how to make drawings like this with just 2 relatively ordinary pencils. And finally, the Mastering Manga Series 1, 2, and 3. Really cannot say thank you enough to anyone who chooses to support me by getting any of those books. But let's go ahead and bring this video to a close. I want to thank you all for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And I'll be back with another one real soon.